just in terms of how we'll run this, I'm going to kickstart just with a little bit of the context for why we created this panel and thought it was a topic worthy of discussing at Verdexchange. I'm going to invite all our panelists to give an intro of themselves so you don't have me up here droning on about their bios. It'll be more interesting to hear from them. We're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of dispatchable energy resources, get all their perspectives on that, some of the key things that need to be true to get to scale on this, which we all think is an important thing to get to. And I do want to leave time at the end for some audience Q&A too. So think about your burning questions as we go through. I'm Eliot Abel. I am an SVP with Pivot Energy. We are a community-scale developer of solar and storage resources. We're headquartered in Colorado, but we are active in about 20 different states, and increasingly focused on this space of building solar and storage projects where they are needed. So it's exciting to have a great group of panelists to talk about what's happening in California and how that's going to extend beyond California. So just as a little bit of context for the discussion, and I think some of this will hopefully resonate from what you've all heard earlier this morning at the conference, but federal policy uncertainty and chaos, quite frankly, aside, the fact is that electricity demand is growing, and it's growing significantly, as we've all been hearing about. We need a lot more clean energy, and we need it fast. And what's been happening is we've been seeing transmission and distribution spend kind of consistently climb up, and we still need a lot more of it. So there's real concerns about how do we go deliver the electricity we need, have it be clean, and not spend everything on transmission and distribution build out. And that's really where dispatchable DERs, we think, can play a big role, right? Because dispatchable DERs, really what we're talking about, for those who don't know, is smaller scale resources, oftentimes solar and battery energy storage, but there's other versions of it as well, that can really be deployed where they are needed, where the load is growing. And this is, in my now home state of Colorado, this has become a real concern and a real focus area. So the Denver metro area for us, demand is outpacing supply. And the reality is you have limited ways to bring more capacity into the city in a cost-effective or timely way. So legislation was passed creating a dispatchable DER program, and now the Colorado Public Utility Commission is working through the details of what that program is going to look like. But what should have resulted in is a lot more small-scale solar and storage in the Denver metro area. So we're starting to see this happen. There's other examples that our panelists are going to talk about, but we do think this is going to be a critical part of the solution. It's not the only part of the solution, but it's a critical part of it. So we're going to learn more about what's happening here in California. Like I said, we're going to talk about the benefits. We're going to talk about some of the barriers or the, let's say, opportunities we have to accelerate this. And with that, I'd love to just kind of go down the line with our panelists and have you each introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about how your organization is either thinking about or exploring more of the use of dispatchable DERs. So Chanel, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Chanel Parson. I am the Director of Clean Energy and Demand Response at Southern California Edison. Southern California Edison, electric utility here in Southern California, 50,000 square miles in central, southern, and coastal California, 15 million residents, and we're electric-only utility. We also are a big thought partner in the clean energy transition. So we've released a white paper in 2019. We updated it in 2023 about what it would take for California to meet carbon neutrality by 2045. And our analysis identified that we're going to need 90% of light and medium duty vehicles to be electric, 80% of buses, 50% of heavy duty vehicles, and 95% of buildings for their space heating as well as their water heating. Big numbers. In addition to all the data centers coming online, we're expecting to see 80% plus increase in electricity demand. And in order to meet that demand, we're going to have to get really creative. We already are getting creative. But if we were building out our grid and serving that demand the traditional way, that would require us to 4x the pace of what our build out on the transmission grid, and 7 to 10x the pace of the grid. 7 to 10x the pace of the build out on the distribution grid. And so that's not feasible from a timeline perspective. It's not feasible from an affordability perspective. And so in addition to doing using grid enhancing technologies on how we build out the grid, demand flexibility is going to be a big piece of this. And so our analysis also indicates that we need 6 megawatts of flexible demand, 2 of which of those would come from vehicle to X type of scenarios. And so as we spoke about, solar, batteries include stationary batteries as well as mobile batteries in vehicles, heat pumps, any kind of DER. And so the way that we look at it, our ability to shift, shape, and shed load will help with affordability, it'll help with reliability, and it will help with readiness of the grid to be able to serve these loads and interconnect customers faster. So what we're looking to do is really build out and implement a strategy and approach for 24/7, 365 demand flexibility. So we do have demand response, which is really more of your event-based, bulk system, some automated, some behavioral approaches. But the demand flexibility that we're looking to build out and implement is really going to be your 24/7, 365 distribution, local grid level, automated, that will allow us to provide affordability benefits for all customers, not just those who are participating. So my role at SCE in particular is I'm on the customer side of the equation. So if we look at leveraging customer DERs and assets to support the grid, I sit on the customer side and I partner heavily with my colleagues who manage the grid, because it takes both of us to pull this off. And we have a couple of things underway. We have one study where we're enrolling customers, residential customers, with whole home devices. So in traditional demand response in California, you can only enroll in with one device. But we are enrolling customers with their EVs, their stationary batteries, their heat pumps, various items, their thermostats. And we're studying what does that look like to be able to call multiple devices per residence. We're calling that our behind the meter optimization of load enhancing technologies. It's a mouthful, so we call it BOLTS as an acronym. We also have a load control management system pilot, which essentially is flexible interconnection. So if a customer comes to us and they need a certain amount of load, we don't have it all ready to go. We are allowing those customers to interconnect with the ability to have more load on some days and times of the year and less loads on other, as long as that's managed by a system, until we're able to build the grid out. But I do think that the demand flexibility solutions we're looking to implement will also support faster interconnection. And the third thing I will shout out that we're doing is a stability improvement with DERs pilot. And it's really how we're integrating our utility DERM system with customer DERs and aggregators to be able to, again, call on devices in a way that's going to support distribution load needs. So handful of exciting things we're doing. There's a number of things we've done already. We've played in VPPs, and we've played in a lot of other spaces. We've dynamic rates. We have a lot of learnings that we are taking into this really next phase and really trying to scale demand flexibility, and excited to talk with all of you about it today.
Sahar.
Good morning, everybody. Sahar Abbaszadeh. I'm an architect and an energy program advisor at ARUP. ARUP is a collective of designers, engineers, and advisors, consultants behind some of the world's most innovative and advanced projects. Some of the most visual examples of that here in Los Angeles are the Broad Museum down the street, the Delta Terminal 3 at LAX, which some of you may have flown through, and the Gerald Desmond Bridge in Long Beach, connecting Long Beach to Terminal Island. You might ask yourself, what does an architect have to say about dispatchable DERs? And that's a legitimate question. And to that, I would say, and some of the architects in the audience and in this conference would agree, that we have a knack for understanding what the customer and the client needs. We are used to bringing multiple stakeholders to the table and understanding just enough about all the aspects of a project or a program that we can connect the dots and really deliver something that meets clients and customers' needs. And that's what I've been doing for the past 15 years. I've been evaluating energy programs for the California IOUs, municipal utilities, and some of the nationwide IOUs, and then really feeding those learnings into program design and strategic plans that help program administrators deliver what their customers need. Some of the examples of that, three I would like to mention here. We developed the strategic plan for Clean Power Alliance for their customer programs. Clean Power Alliance is a community choice aggregator operating here in the Los Angeles metro area. And ARUP put together their suite of programs for their customers. And we are now involved in helping them deliver their Power Ready program, which is a behind-the-meter solar and storage program for municipal facilities, hence dispatchable DERs. Another example of that is a program I've been working on for the Tri-County Regional Energy Network. The Tri-County Regional Energy Network is a collaboration between the counties of Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura. And they have a program that we help them develop called Energy Assurance Services. And that really follows the gamut of energy resilience. We start with community resources, so schools, libraries, community centers, senior centers, veterans halls, and really take them through the loading order for energy resilience, starting with energy efficiency, demand flexibility, and once we've explored that, then we help them explore renewable energy, add battery energy storage, and microgrid if it's the right fit. So again, these are distributed facilities in the Tri-County region that are dispatchable. And then the last project that we may be able to get into as part of this discussion is an affordable housing project that we are working on in the SDG&E territory, and that is funded by a grant from the California Energy Commission to really look at affordable housing. How can we build more affordable housing but not sacrifice, all of our climate priorities? So for that project, we have priorities like the building needs to be able to operate off the grid between 4 to 9 p.m. or the building needs to be able to shave 20% of its demand at the utility's request, and that all residential end uses need to be able to be managed and respond to real-time pricing signals. So again, dispatchable DERs. So I look forward to discussing these as part of this panel, and I'll pass it on to Howard.
Great, thanks. My name is Howard Chang, the CEO for Ava Community Energy, and we're the community choice aggregator that serves Alameda County and San Joaquin County. We launched our services to customers in 2018 and serve a population of about 2 million people. As Sahar noted, the CCAs, community choice aggregators, if you're not familiar with them, we provide energy, just the generation portion of the bill, so the utility, in our case PG&E, or down here in Southern California, SCE, will continue to provide the transmission, distribution, metering services for customers that we serve. I think this topic of dispatchable DERs is something that we as a CCA are really focused on. I think this is an area that CCAs in general feel that we can engage very closely with our customers and our member cities on understanding how do you impact some of the behavioral changes that are necessary in order to drive greater adoption in various DERs and such. I'll note we serve Alameda County, and we are extending and expanding into San Joaquin County. So just earlier this month, actually, we started to serve City of Stockton and City of Lathrop in San Joaquin County. Really excited by that and what that represents, in particular as it relates to DERs and dispatchable DERs specifically. This is a different demographic base, different income base, much peakier energy load, much greater agricultural load in San Joaquin County. So it's interesting to think about as we launch the variety of VPPs and customer engagement programs that we have in mind, thinking about these different types of customer segments across Alameda County and San Joaquin County is something that we're really excited by and starting to serve the Central Valley specifically. I'll summarize maybe two different programmatic areas that we're focused on as it relates to DERs, and obviously can go into more detail as we get further into the panel. One is on the transportation electrification side of things. So just a few weeks ago, actually, we launched our managed charging program. As far as I'm aware, it's one of the largest programs in California. So we're targeting enrollment of 10,000 home residential EVs to enroll in our platform. With that program, we're going to provide an upfront incentive, a running incentive, and obviously try to guide and control the charging hours of those customers to be in low cost, lower demand hours in general. So that's something on the EV side of things. On the home residential behind the meter storage side of things, we've done a couple different approaches there. A number of years back, we did a program called Resilient Home, and that was a collaboration or partnership with Sunrun, where we aggregated a couple thousand homes in order to do load modification in the evenings during those kind of peakier ramp hours. And with that pilot, we are now designing a bigger solar and storage incentive program that we're looking to launch in the fall. And in that program, looking to provide incentives for residential customers to install behind the meter storage at their homes. And with that, have some dispatchable rights in the evenings. So that's a program that we've earmarked about $15 million towards launching in the fall. It'll have both an upfront incentive piece and then a sort of a 5-year ongoing incentive piece as well. So just two different flavors of how we want to launch these types of dispatchable DERS programs. The last comment I'll just make is we are in early days for these programs. The managed charging program I mentioned, targeting 10,000 customers. That's not an insignificant number, but within our territory, we have close to 150,000 EVs. So 10,000 is still just the start there, and I expect that we'll learn a tremendous amount in launching those programs. Look to tweak the messaging to enroll customers, look to tweak the platform, the parameters, and things like that. So early days for us for sure. Haresh?
Thanks, Howard. Hi, I'm Haresh Kamath with EPRI. We are a independent nonprofit research organization doing public interest research in energy and the environment. We are member supported, so we are supported by members, largely electric utilities from around the world. We work with over 400 members globally. My role is in something called cross-cutting technologies, which is bringing together a number of different technologies to find specific solutions, and one of those areas is flexible demand. When we talk about flexible demand, it's actually more than just demand, right? We're looking at building technologies, we're talking about DER, including solar and storage integrated into those buildings, we're talking about load management, but we're also talking about planning and operations processes at the utilities. So bringing all those things together and creating solutions has really been a big part of what we have been doing for the last 20 years. A lot of our work has been research and including deployment of pilot installations around the world. We've done quite a few of them here in California, not too far away from here in Fontana about 10 years ago. And more recently, we're setting one up in Petaluma, which is almost a microgrid, really. It does have a connection to the grid, but it's if it works the way we're looking at it, there will be no actual export to the grid of power. Occasionally we'd bring power in. So projects like that really are what we're trying to do to try to manage demand on the grid, demonstrate that it's possible, and then work with our members to implement it. Here in California is really kind of the epicenter of all of that, and we needed to implement it very soon. The need is obvious in the very near future. So look forward to discussing this more with the panel.
Thanks all. So now in part, you know why I was excited to have this panel, because we've got a great group here to really dive into this. It's still early days, and there's a lot to be figured out, but we've got IOU perspective, we've got the customer perspective, we've got CCA perspective, we've got public interest represented. So I want to dive in and really just talk about, from each of your perspectives, like what is the primary benefit that you see of really focusing on dispatchable DERs, right? What are they positioned to help solve for that other resources, more centralized generation, et cetera, even centralized storage, dispatchability, can't solve as well, or can't solve as quickly or cost effectively? So Chanel, I might start with you and go down the line again.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and really the utility perspective is looking at it from three benefits. One is affordability. So we know that if we can shape the peak, we have to procure less power at the peak. If we procure less power and peak power, it's cheaper for all customers, not just those participating. We also know that if we have very predictable flexibility, then that allows us the ability to potentially defer upgrades to the grid. So we may not need to install a larger transformer, for example, because we are able to manage the demand curve in a way that doesn't require that larger transformer. And so that, again, provides affordability savings for all customers, whether or not they're directly participating in this type of, in whatever program that might roll into demand flexibility. When I look at readiness, I mentioned we expect 80+% new demand on the grid between now and 2045. And back in the old days, which really weren't that long ago, you'd have a strip mall or some new housing development, and they'll say, hey, we need this much power in 2 years or 3 years. Well, today it's, we need this much power next month. We need this much power in 2 months. And the way that the grid has historically been built out, those timelines, just even getting permits is not possible in those timelines. And so demand flexibility will help us with interconnecting new customer load faster, which will help with accelerating the pace of the clean energy transition that we're on. And then the third piece is reliability. So if we can really have dependable load under management in a flexible manner, then we can have more reliability on the grid. We can focus our resources on the areas of most need, because we're using demand flexibility to balance out demand and supply all over the board. So those are the three main benefits that we're pursuing with demand flexibility.
Thanks, Chanel. And then Sahar, for your clients, what are the benefits for them? I mean, there's inevitably there's going to be more complexity. You're thinking about things you maybe weren't thinking about. You're trying to build affordable housing. Now all of a sudden you're talking about being a flexible energy resource. Why? Why would they want to do that?
2 words. 2 words. Energy resilience. And there's a really unique example of this in the county of Santa Barbara. Most of you have heard about the Goleta load pocket. In Santa Barbara, they are at the end of the distribution and transmission lines from PG&E in the north and Southern California Edison from the south. And that gives them a very treacherous condition in terms of their power supply. And really, I would say 5 years ago, they started thinking about alternatives. What is the alternative vision for the county, relying on these centralized, rigid power supply systems to a more distributed and flexible and resilient supply system? And that's where their emphasis on distributed energy resources comes from. And then from the more sort of on the ground perspective, from the facilities that we work with, they see the impacts of the power safety shutoffs and some of the unfortunate climate disasters that we've experienced. And from the facility perspective, it's really helpful to have power backup. And that's why they are interested in pursuing these. So for the residential building that I mentioned, with affordable housing, you know, they have residents that have refrigerators, they have residents that are dependent on medical supply, and having a resilient backup available is huge.
Howard, how does this look different for CCAs versus, for instance, you know, the IOU perspective?
Well, obviously there are quite a number of similarities. Maybe and then of course there are some uniquenesses as well. You know, I'd highlight the benefits in kind of three categories, obvious categories perhaps, but affordability, reliability, and decarbonization. And on the affordability front, certainly we want to incentivize customers to charge their vehicles or charge and discharge their behind-the-meter batteries at certain hours. And those are hours that are optimized based off our power costs. So there's a clear benefit for us there. But I'd also bring in that sort of customer-centric view, which is we want to make sure that they're seeing savings as well, right? So for that managed charging program that I mentioned earlier, there's an upfront incentive. They get a $75 incentive for enrolling in that program. They also get a $25 annual incentive to make sure they stay on the program and they're operating within those parameters. But most importantly is we're actually forecasting $140 in savings if they're actually, you know, sort of complying with the parameters of that program. So when you look at all of that combined annually, that becomes a meaningful number to them. And ultimately, these are EV owners. So what we're really trying to do is find ways to bring down their costs and further adoption of EVs in order to provide broader decarbonization. So hopefully that's part of that affordability and that decarbonization piece that I mentioned. On the reliability piece, obviously we're a CCA, so we're a different type of load serving entity than the utility. And I'll just note that for managed charging, we have a program that we launched. PG&E actually in our territory also launched a managed charging program. They're pretty different flavors or approaches. Ours is targeting roughly 10,000 customers in total enrollment, and we allow for 21 different makes. PG&E's is targeting 7,500, so similar in size, and they're looking primarily at Teslas. And what they're really trying to do is target specific load pockets that will allow for deferment of costs and upgrades, so sort of non-wire solutions, right? And we're really looking for energy arbitrage and finding ways to reduce some of our procurement costs. So obviously these are very aligned goals, but when you think about a utility and a CCA, they may have different ways to look at those benefits. I think that's a key part of it as well.
Thanks, Howard. And Haresh, the public, how's the public going to benefit from all of this?
Well, I think ultimately this is really about affordability and reliability from the public perspective, right? We want to be able to give the utility options to maintain flexibility in the light of, without compromising customer convenience and comfort. And ultimately, what this is about, really, by having these types of flexible demand, we can handle both on the planning side for utilities perspective in terms of infrastructure investment, as well as from an operational side in terms of dealing with just the variability of renewable energy, for example, or the variability of large loads, or even loads like things like vehicle charging, as Howard mentioned. Having these as an option is extremely valuable. That can also help with the affordability of the grid by keeping costs down, by avoiding overinvestment in infrastructure. And ultimately, for the customer, they're most concerned about reliability. Being able to get reliable power at an affordable cost is absolutely critical. And that is really kind of the bedrock of everything we're talking here.
And now, so one more round robin. I think let's talk about what it's going to take to actually scale this. And I do want to leave a few minutes for any questions in the audience, but let's go. Haresh, I'm sticking with you. We're going to come back this way now. But from your perspective and from the work that EPRI is doing, what do we still need to figure out, or what do we need to test, or what needs to be true to truly scale this? Because we talked about it, it's still early days. There's a lot of interesting pilots that are going on. There's data being collected. But if we're truly going to make this scale and make an impact on the load growth we're seeing, from your perspective, from EPRI's perspective, what is needed?
So we've seen, and that's a great question. I think depending on who you ask, you'll get a lot of different answers, because I think there's a lot of different ways to implement this, a lot of different ways that we have implemented it, and some have been more successful than others. I think a lot of what we're looking for is a best practice approach, something that will let us do this in a reasonably uniform way in different places. And of course, every place is different. Every place has different regulations, different conditions on the ground, climate conditions, and even different demographics, what people are more interested in. And so you're going to have to implement this slightly differently in different places. Having more data on what different types of customers are really looking for and what they're willing to do is very important, I think, in this, especially the degree to which affordability outweighs reliability for different customers. And one of the things that we see, at least from our side, and it's not so much the technical issue, so much as a business model or economic issue. How do we really manage that contract between the utility and the customer in terms of actually being able to control that, manage that load, if it is in fact a customer load? A lot of times, one of the biggest propositions out there that a lot of people have is, hey, we can do this all on the customer side. The customer is just a part of the grid now. Well, the customer has to agree to that, and the customer has not historically been that amenable to just being a part of the grid and being shut down whenever they need to be shut down. Rather than trying to address it from that perspective, let's talk about what does that conversation need to be, or be able to handle that on the utility side of the meter so that you don't have to actually involve the customer in that decision, that it's all done with utility assets. There are lots of different business models for this, and some of those things need to be explored.
Thanks, Haresh. Howard, from your perspective, what do we need to scale?
I'll just say that scaling is the challenge in and of itself, right? So I'm excited to say we launched our managed charging program. It's targeting 10,000 customers. It's one of the largest programs out there. That's a pretty small number when you think about that, and we're really in the early days of seeing how customers will engage in a program like this. We're going to do a lot of testing in terms of just how do you communicate with customers and market to customers, do A/B testing along those lines to see what sort of hooks them in. I think a couple $100 in annual savings is meaningful, and we hope that that's the substance of why customers want to engage. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to adjust their behavior and their patterns. That's the key here, right? They're going to be charging at different hours, and we'll need to see how successful that is and if customers are happy about that. And in a similar way for that behind-the-meter storage program I talked about, we're going to be giving out $2,000 in incentives. That's a nice, healthy amount of money. I don't think it's going to be a problem to have customers go and seek those incentives. I think the challenge is really understand what are they giving up for that. They're procuring that battery for a purpose, and now we're paying them incentive, but we want them to charge and discharge at certain hours. We want to have certain dispatch rights for some unique events throughout the course of the year. So how do we make sure that we get value out of that as well? Build greater resiliency, but also don't take away some level of control from customers in a manner that turns them off to a program in some way. And getting customers to engage in these types of platforms is historically very difficult. We know that. And so I'm really excited to sort of learn how we launch these programs and see how customers engage with them and what their satisfaction level is, quite frankly.
And Sahar, how do you make sure this isn't just one affordable housing developer that goes down this route, and that those learnings and knowledge from going through it is shared more broadly to get scale?
Yeah, so this will be a really interesting experiment, the project that we're working on, where we've partnered with USC, and they are going to work with the tenants to help them essentially be engaged building managers, respond to pricing signals, respond to demand response requests. And we'll really get to see, do people just want set it and forget it system, or do they actually want to know how much am I paying right now for my energy, and should I raise my thermostat, or should I turn off some lights? The other aspect of the affordable housing project pilot that we're working on that's really interesting is really exploring how do you finance a battery energy storage system at a sector of the economy that's particularly not been at the forefront of implementing innovative technologies. And by working with the utility allowances and the unique financing structures that the affordable housing sector has mastered, we can find bits of funding on a monthly basis that, can fund a power purchase agreement that can finance energy resilience and distributed energy resources for that sector. So it's really exciting. Hope to be back here to talk about the project when it's finished.
Chanel?
Yeah, bear with me. I have a wish list here, but it's not too long. It's not too long. There's 5 things on it to scale. So the first one is the ability to direct control devices. And having a standard communication platform is going to be important to scale. If there's different communication languages, if there's different contracts, if there's different proprietary, firewalls, it's going to be costly, and we're not going to be able to get there in time. And so I think there's a couple reasons, additional reasons why that's important. The other is that customers want to set it and forget it. They don't want to be thinking about their energy usage. They've told us they don't want to be thinking about managing their energy usage every day. So if you have standard communication device platform to control these devices, customers can set, hey, I just need my vehicle charged by 80% by the time I leave the house at 7 a.m. Hey, I just don't want my thermostat to go above this temperature. Hey, I need hot water at this time. And if they can just set those things and not think about it again, they're happy. And then that way, the utility or whoever the utility uses in the background to speak to these devices can do it in a way that doesn't interrupt their flow. They won't even notice, when their vehicle's charged, because they just know it's ready when they need it. They won't even notice when their water is heated if they have a heat pump water heater, because it's ready when they need it. Also, the utilities need that predictability. So we need to know, to be able to depend on, what that demand curve is going to look like, so that we can make decisions about procuring power as well as upgrading the grid. And one of the ways to get there, SC is a founding member of the Mercury Consortium, and so it is looking to be what Bluetooth is to other devices in this demand flexibility environment, so seeking to try to achieve that. Second thing on my wish list is policy and regulation that allows the utility to test and scale quickly. So our regulatory framework was put in place long before demand flexibility was a concept, and it's not very amenable to doing tests, changing, adjusting, doing new things. It often takes a long time to kind of get decisions through. I think the third thing on my wish list is attractive incentives for early adopters. So we need to incentivize these early folks because we need to learn from them and we need to learn quickly. And we want to invite them in. As Howard mentioned, we need to learn how they're going to engage with these programs, and that's very important. But I do want to emphasize early adopters. I don't want us to get into a similar place with solar where the level of incentives are very attractive up front, and then they were expected for every customer moving forward, and then it became a little bit of a challenge when it wasn't sustainable. And so I think we need to, at the outset, identify attractive incentives for early adopters, but these get phased out over time. We also need to learn from solar in the way that it's not just we want to do demand flex, we have to. I think with solar, we got all of the solar in the system, and then we learned, oh my goodness, we have a duck curve. We need to do something about how we manage the usage. Right now, customers are adopting DERs, EVs, solar, stationary batteries, heat pumps. That's not being managed right now. We're gonna find ourselves in another place a few years from now when this adoption peaks to say, oh my goodness, everyone, we're already starting to see we have a secondary peak on the grid when cars start charging at 10:01 p.m., and it's like, oh, we have a secondary peak. And so I want us to also learn, it's not just getting the DERs in the system that's important, but it's the managed use of the DERs. Fourth thing on the wish list is flexible rates. I know that there's a philosophy that everything can be controlled with rates, and we just need dynamic rates at small increments, but small increment dynamic rates limit flexibility. And so if you're using a managed charging program, for example, if it costs the customer less to charge their vehicle at 11 than it does at midnight, but the grid needs to charge it at midnight for use benefits for everyone, that customer is not going to want to charge it at midnight because it's cheaper for them at 11. And so the larger windows we have for flexibility to do what's needed at the distribution level in the the localities that we need, it might be 11 in this area, it might be 12 in this area, it might be 1 in another area, those flexible rates are going to be helpful. And then the fifth thing on my wish list is this here, talking, learning from each other. All of us here are doing different types of pilots and tests. If we're looking to scale, everyone can't recreate the wheel themselves. We have to talk about it, learn from each other, share information. So.
That's great. Thank you all. So we're technically at time, but I'm going to steal an extra 5 minutes from lunch for anyone who wants to stay and make sure we do have an opportunity for questions that are out there. So, yes, Sarah.
What size customers are we talking about? You just keep talking customers, but is it entirely residential? Is it C&I? Is it industrial scale? Like, where does it work for any level of demand, or does it break down to the lower levels?
I love the question. I'll start out with that because it is a great question to distinguish. Different customers have different types of needs, right? We know that some really large commercial industrial customers, those very dynamic rates work for them because they can implement an energy management system and they can manage that in a way that creates enough savings for them to make significant impacts, right, to their bottom line. But your everyday residential customer is not going to probably have the interest or the maybe the capital to put in such an elaborate energy management system, and that's more of the customer who just wants to set it and forget it. I just need my things ready when I need them, and whatever happens behind the scenes. If you think of your cell phone, right? Your cell phone plan will kind of toggle your internet speeds, right, based on what's needed on the overall system. And for the most part, you don't realize it, right? As long as you can get to whatever social media page you need when you need it, you don't care. And so, so it is not one size fits all. It is identifying what are the different customer segments, what are they needing, and having multiple options for them. But I do want everyone in. So when I'm thinking about demand flexibility, I want residential, commercial, industrial, government, everyone to participate. It just may look different.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think that's a very complete answer. But the reason you want everybody in is because they're different, right? The diversity is actually a good thing. When you have a diverse portfolio, you can actually be able to manage these different kinds of customers in different ways, depending on the need of the moment. And that really is a very important aspect of it, both, again, from a planning and from an operations standpoint.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I heard a lot about innovation that's happening behind the meter in terms of customer sites. The utilities go through a lot in front of the meter. There's a lot happening there in terms of dispatchable loads and dispatchable values, etc.
Yeah, it's definitely some things that we're looking at and testing at small scale right now, but it's intended to learn to see, what does work better. And I honestly believe that we're going to end up with a mix of solutions, right? So it's going to be some to the meter, some behind the meter, and some scenarios, one's going to make more sense than the other. But we're definitely dealing with a lot of different options, both at the distribution level and then more at the bulk system level.
Yeah, and I'll just add on that when I think about in front of the meter versus behind the meter, I really think more about customer-centric or non-customer-centric. So a behind-the-meter program, if you're going to ask your customers to change their behaviors, how you design that program, you're going to do it in a very different way. And in front-of-the-meter resources, whether it's large or small, you may define it as a dispatchable DER or not. But in those cases, we as the load-serving entity are really investing in that, and we're going to control that asset for the most part.
And I'll just add, that's where we're heading in Colorado. So the example I gave at the beginning of what Denver is doing looks like front-of-the-meter solar and storage resources, right, in the metro area where you have this supply-demand imbalance. So the customer could be a company like mine that will invest the capital, build the asset, own and operate the asset, and just deliver the power to the utility when it's needed in a place that has value because of this supply-demand challenge. So yeah, it's a mix, and they're all being explored, and we're going to see how we scale it across the board. Sahar,
If I could just add one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to add, in California, there has been a proceeding at the CPUC for microgrids and resiliency, and that's the proceeding that resulted in the microgrid incentive program. And the microgrid incentive program, it's really a community microgrid program where you are front of the meter and you're working closely with the utility. They're also putting skin in the game in terms of the resources and the upgrades that are making to the system. But then you have a situation where you can take advantage of the load diversity that multiple facilities have to be able to provide the dispatchability and the resilience that the customers need.
Yeah, I was about to add, Sahar made my point, actually. But, I mean, really globally, looking at this globally, so much of this depends, not just just depending on the market and regulatory rules in a certain area, you may or may not be able to have utility-owned assets, on the front side of the meter. So much of this depends on the regulatory and market rules in a particular area, and especially when you look at that globally, that influences a lot of the way these things go.
Great. Okay, I've taken as much lunch as I'm allowed to take. Thanks, everyone. Continue the conversation in the hallways. And please join me in thanking our panelists.